Want to call the East Greenbush Central School District Board of Education meeting, special meeting this evening to order. Attendance, we have all board members present in person and Mr. Dunn is present virtually. This is an abbreviated meeting, the purpose of which was to have a superintendent report about the current situation regarding any guidance that has come out recently, talk about some school reopening and contact tracing information, and then have some discussion items about that guidance with the board and some other topics. There will be no public or board comment. There's no voting action tonight. So this is an information sharing and discussion meeting tonight. So with that, please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. With all the changes that have occurred very recently in the last couple of weeks and the different conversations that have been taking place, especially with the new governor, some things that have come out from the Department of Health, and then the fact that, school for us will be starting up tomorrow. We thought it prudent to have a public meeting to discuss some of the issues and items that the district is going through. And I'll turn over to our superintendent, Mr. Simons.
Thank you, Mr. Buno.
I'm sorry, Michelle. I didn't. Sorry, Michelle's here.
So I appreciate the board making themselves available for this special meeting, and I appreciate that those members of the public that are here are participating in the meeting, and those via live stream. So last Thursday, school districts across New York State received two documents that provide guidance for opening the schools, and the district reviewed those documents over the course of the last few days to assess to what degree those new guidance documents align with the plan that we had been presenting to the public and the board for opening. So I wanted to give kind of an overview this evening of what those new guidance documents mean for our school district, how we will be meeting those requirements, and some of the issues involved in actually implementing some of the recommendations, actually requirements. We rolled out our opening plan over the course of the last several meetings, and we had informed the public that there could be adjustments to the plan based on the transition that Mr. Buno talked about with a new governor, who had indicated, Governor Hochul, that when she came in that she was going to review issues with the New York State Department of Health, providing more specific guidance for our schools, and she has been doing that. The first document that we received was a commissioner's determination that is still under review by all districts in New York State and all county health departments. I'm going to ask Mr. Goodwin to pull that document up just so the public knows that it is available and posted on board docs. It is a fairly comprehensive document and detailed document. I'm just going to provide an overview, not only based on our read of the document, but also the discussions that have been occurring in our region among all of our Questar BOCES school districts and with Questar administration. The state is now requiring schools to address its employees through either ensuring that the employee is fully vaccinated or requiring once a week testing. That requirement is new to the districts, and one of the variables involved in implementing that requirement is the availability of the testing. And all county departments of health, including our own, as well as the ones within our Questar, have indicated that at this point, there isn't a sufficient supply of the type of rapid tests that we can use for meeting that requirement with our employees. However, we are preparing for that requirement by identifying informally the number of employees who we believe are vaccinated through a survey and determining a count of what we would need for tests. That survey was sent out confidentially to our employees yesterday, and we are starting to receive the results, and that survey will close tomorrow morning. I don't know if you have current data Ms. Cannon and I spoke about this afternoon, and we were getting a fairly high return on the survey. And of those surveys that were returned already, a fairly high rate of vaccination. And I'm going to rely on Marissa for the numbers.
Thank you, Mr. Simons. We're just loading here. Right now, we have received 412 responses. We have 750 employees, so we need about 300 more. As of current, we have, let's see, 393 vaccinated individuals out of those 412 respondents, and 19 are not vaccinated. This link to the survey will be available to all of our staff members until 9 a.m. tomorrow. And for those that don't have computers readily available to them, we have made paper copies, and those copies will be picked up tomorrow, stored and reviewed confidentially in my office.
Thank you, Ms. Cannon. So it's very important that as we collect this information, that our employees and our board understands that there's a whole nother step to this. Once we know and can provide the information to Questar, estimating the number of tests that we would need, they have to procure those tests through the county. And the state sent something out to the BOCES, I believe yesterday, requesting information and data on the number of tests that component districts would need. And we're going to be discussing this tomorrow morning as well in our regular meeting. The next step to it is we have to determine specifically which employees are vaccinated and which are not. And we're investigating a couple of different options to be able to do that. The survey that we're doing right now is basically a count. It goes to all employees, and based on the 750 employees that we have, we're trying to figure out how many would not be fully vaccinated at this point in time and require us to test once a week. There's some software available that would permit employees to submit their vaccination card and or their Excelsior Pass or other acceptable documentation through a privately protected portal that would go to Ms. Cannon's office only. Our attorneys have recommended that the process be centralized, and that we believe that that is the best way to go for those employees who have access in facility with computers. So Peter is pursuing a purchase of a program that Questar, I think, already uses, Qualtrics. And Questar is, it's coastable through Questar. And so we're looking into that as an option. We had pursued potentially looking at the program Family ID that we use for sports, but we determined that that was not as protected as this particular tool because we have multiple employees that manage it as administrators. Additionally, we are considering having those employees who would like to submit the information in person to make an appointment with Marissa to do so, so that we don't have confidentiality concerns with lines of people waiting in Marissa's office. So we're hoping that the majority of people would submit electronically once we make it available, and the others would make appointments. The big issue is the supply of tests. And the supply of tests is impacted by the state of New York releasing funds that counties are supposed to receive for implementation of the plan that I've been talking about that involved testing. The majority of counties have not had final approval of their plans, nor have the money's been released to purchase the testing supplies and equipment to comply with the requirement that all employees who are not fully vaccinated be tested once a week. So we're in the process of gearing up for this. I think we've made great strides since last Thursday, and we will be implementing it once the tests are available. And all of the counties, again, and through the Association of New York State County Health Departments, have indicated that they are not ready to do this yet. Okay, but we're all working together to try to come into full compliance. The other portion to the commissioner's directive relates to student testing. And in summary, we cannot require students currently to be tested, but we have to offer testing on a consent basis to unvaccinated students. We're already doing that for all students that participate in sports. So this would be an expansion of that. We would likely, depending on the sufficient supply of tests to be able to do that, incorporate the sports testing within that. So we wouldn't have to test students separately. They would simply consent as a student to be tested, and they'd be included in the same plan. The county funds that are flowing from the state to purchase this testing also include Questar being able to provide some staff to help with the testing. And so that's another variable that we have to consider as we move forward with this. We have to have sufficient staff to be able to do the testing. And that process of hiring those folks or identifying who those folks would be was underway at Questar, but the funds haven't flown yet to the counties. So all of this is in flux to some degree. We're all working together to try to come into full compliance. But the commissioner's memo basically says, if you're an employee and you work for a school district, you either have to be fully vaccinated or tested once a week. And if you're a student, districts have to receive consent from the families, and we are required to offer that to unvaccinated students. One thing that we're also doing this week is we've asked our nurses, who are the only personnel that have access to the state's database regarding vaccinations, to verify and update the vaccination status of students, both the students that are participating in sports, but all students, so that we have that data available. That's important, not only to determine how much testing would be required, it's also important to have that information immediately available when we have a case in the school and they identify a contact. We want to be able to provide that information as efficiently as possible to the county to say that student is vaccinated, because there's another set of rules. And I'll go over that when we go through the contact tracing information. We verified with Dr. Albert's intervention with the New York State Department of Health that only nurses can only look at student data. They can't be looking at employee data. So that methodology of going into the state system is not available to the district employees to do so. So that's why we're doing the surveying, and that's why we're thinking about the electronic portal to submit the information. And I think we've got a good grasp of what we need to do at this point. So I'll just kind of throw that out for questions now on that particular piece, the testing piece.
Has there been any conversations with the bargaining units regarding the testing and this issue?
We sent a communication out. I sent an email out to all the bargaining unit leaders that we would be discussing this, but we were still reviewing the requirements. And our attorneys have advised us that we have to impact bargain this. Impact bargaining means that we have to discuss what the impact of the employees might be, but we have to do it. So you could get into discussions with employee groups about when the testing would occur, how the testing would occur, whether that is incorporated into their current workday, or whether that is an expectation before or after their workday. Those are the kinds of issues that I imagine the unions might bring forward. But it is a requirement. We just have to, discuss the impact with the unions, but we're trying to assess the impact on the district before we do that.
Do these changes impact the high-risk testing? We're kind of mandating it.
Athletics is considered high-risk athletics is considered to be separate. That requirement that we have to test high-risk athletes and really require them to be fully vaccinated is part of the second memo that was sent from the state, was incorporated into the new guidance from DOH. So high-risk sports, which I'm planning on discussing in a little while, we have to base what we do with high-risk sports on the community transmission rate, which is still very high. It's going up in Rensselaer County. It's about 4.5% right now. And I will be talking in a little while about asking the board to weigh in at the next meeting on a policy for winter high-risk sports that involves requiring all the students to participate to be vaccinated. I think that's the way we should go. I'll explain why I think that when we get to that piece, but making that determination now gives adequate notice for those students and families to become vaccinated with the need to go for their first shot and 2 weeks in between, and then you're not fully vaccinated till 2 weeks after that. That's a 6-week process that if we're going to do that, we should let our families know as soon as possible. Okay. So Peter, if you want to go to the next memo.
Just from a quick comment, so the funds aren't released for the counties yet, and the counties need to purchase the tests, and there's not enough tests available. Is that
The funds are not released by the state
the
yet,
state
and the counties don't have those funds
purchase the tests? They don't
to purchase
can't
the
get any-
tests, and the tests are not available.
They're on order.
They're not on order.
Nothing's on order. Okay.
No. Craig Hansen has been trying to identify a source for the
Okay.
tests. Okay, and we've been using the Abbott Binax rapid test. I think with this, I would hope that with the state's intervention and gathering some of this information from us, that they're trying to procure tests to support the counties and support the districts. That would be my
A lot of tests.
best guess. Well, I calculated
Statewide.
100,000
I mean,
if
statewide. you think
if
about
I
that.
could, for our district. If
Yeah,
you-
for one district.
Right, if you think about it, and we haven't finalized this yet, but if you assume you have to have a test available for every unvaccinated student, that's our entire K-5 population. It doesn't mean that they will all consent to that, but we have 1,750 students at the kindergarten through 5th grade level. 6 through 12, we have about 2,556. You could estimate that of that population, grade 6 through 12, some of them are not eligible for vaccination, so would have to be tested, and some are not. Approximately 40 to 50% of those students are not currently vaccinated. Then you take your employees and you have to multiply it all by 36 weeks, depending on when you implement it. If you implement it at the end of this month, it'll be 36 weeks. So it's 36 times the number of unvaccinated students whose parents consent, and 36 times the number of employees who are unvaccinated. So it's a big number. It's over 100,000 tests just for East Greenbush. You obviously could have a more reliable number if you did the consents first. And we're thinking about doing that. How many families would consent to this?
Do we have a priority list for, because I don't think we're going to have enough tests. So how is it kind of ranked? Do faculty or staff have to get vaccinated before we go to the kids? Do the kids tested? Is there a priority on that?
Thinking out loud, the staff is required. So I think we would try to come into compliance with that requirement first, which is, would determine the number of tests that we need for our unvaccinated employees. It may be a very small number, based on the survey that we've gotten back so far, unless all the vaccinated employees answered the survey and quickly, and the remaining balance of the employees are unvaccinated. So that would be the priority, to come into compliance with that and to offer the testing where we can, based on consent of the parents. We only have enough tests currently within the inventory that we have. We're short some to finish the fall high-risk sports. We're about 400 short. So, and Craig Hansen has been working diligently on this for all the districts in the Questar. So the other guidance that came out was really, I think, I would say memorializing in New York State Department of Health regulations and guidance, the same requirements that we've been talking about, which were the CDC requirements. There's very little exception to that, with the exception of the testing component being incorporated in there. So social distancing in the classrooms is still 3 feet. Social distancing in cafeterias is as much as you can to accommodate the serving of meals within the cafeteria. Having students eat in a classroom where the desks are 3 feet apart, eating lunch with the masks off is really not permitted. Also, the same practices for parents to monitor symptomatic students and to keep students home, for employees who are symptomatic to stay home. The only things where we veered from the CDC is in the area of music, which we talked about. And so when I received this, I surveyed the other larger districts again to see if they were going to make any changes to their position, that as long as the students who were in chorus and band or in general music singing were wearing masks and or using those bell covers, they could be 3 feet apart. The rule says they can be 6 feet apart without masks and sing. So none of them are changing that. They're all going forward with that. So I would recommend that we go forward with that and monitor that. We have ordered, and we have a sufficient number right now of the bell covers to get started. We've also ordered those other types of masks that Kathleen suggested. They're generally used for flute and piccolo players, where you can, and Linda has probably a better way of describing these, but basically you can play the flute with your mask on.
And the masks that we ordered have a little pocket slit in the side of them where you slide the instrument in and it can go out the other side. So their mouth is covered at all times.
One thing throughout these documents that I really want to highlight, and when we get to contact tracing, we'll talk about it, is you are less likely as a student or an employee to be subject to a 10-day quarantine if you are vaccinated and asymptomatic in all cases, whether it's in the classroom, whether it's on the bus, whether it's on the sports field, whether it's anywhere in the school. So that point of encouraging vaccination is embedded into all of these guidance documents. There is an exemption if you are sitting in a classroom and you are a student and you are 3 feet apart from another student who is a positive case. If you're both wearing well-fitting masks for that duration of period of time, you don't need to quarantine. There are also different pathways depending on whether you're vaccinated and asymptomatic or whether you're unvaccinated. If you're symptomatic, vaccinated or unvaccinated, you're going to quarantine. But if you're asymptomatic and you're vaccinated, you don't have to quarantine. If you're unvaccinated and asymptomatic, you're quarantining. So an example that I would bring up is in our recent situation with athletic testing, we had identified 2 cases through our testing. The county is saying that that has to be confirmed by a PCR test. Okay, so both of those students were in different situations. One was vaccinated and one was not. One who was vaccinated was symptomatic. The one who was unvaccinated was not symptomatic. They both had to go get a PCR test. The PCR test confirmed that they were positive. So in both cases, they had to quarantine. We're also getting cases now. On my drive home tonight before the board meeting, I got a call from the county of 2 additional student cases and 5 contacts. They can't start school. And these were elementary age kids, so the vaccination is not available for them. But we also have a number of other cases, 3 or 4, that have occurred. And the county is telling us that it's generally family contact. The cases are within the family. So one of the things I would recommend that we do is, and the county supported this in our conversation today, we want to encourage the parents to call us first if there's COVID-19 in the home, and in the event that someone in the home has it, the kids should stay home until such time as that would include siblings of students who have tested positive, because that's where the infection spread is occurring right now. So I would recommend that in the event that we're informed by either the county or the parent that a child in a family is positive, that the siblings have to stay home too. Okay. The contact tracing. Peter, can you pull up my outline? Because I'm afraid I'm going to forget what I want to talk about. So we talked about the testing component, which is the commissioner's directive. Contact tracing. There are tables and flow charts that are available on board docs, and they're also available on our website on the yellow banner at the top of the website. I'm going to ask Peter if you can pull up the contact tracing documents for just a minute. And in order to explain this, I need to do it up at the screen. Sean, okay. So these documents were developed by a regional work group being used in a large majority of districts in the capital region. And
Jeff, can you grab a microphone? Thank you.
these documents were developed by a regional work group, which Questar BOCES and Rensselaer County representatives served on. And then they were, as did the county departments of health. They were shared with the county department of health, and they were given their support for implementation. And they've been shared with all of our administrators, our nurses, and all of our employees, and are available to the parents on the website. So in the case of a student who tests positive for COVID-19, who comes into contact with other students, the first question we have to ask in the contact tracing process is, were both the positive student and the exposed student wearing their masks consistently and correctly? That's the example of when I talk about they're sitting in class together, but they both have the masks on, even though they're 3 feet apart. If yes is the answer, the next question is, was the student less than 3 feet from the case for 15 minutes or more over a 24-hour period? So it can be 5 minutes, then another interval of 5 minutes, then another interval of 5 minutes over a 24-hour period. If the answer is no, there's no quarantine, regardless of vaccination status. If the answer is yes, scroll up, Peter. Then we have to ask, is the student fully vaccinated? If it's no, the student becomes quarantined. If it's yes, then the next question is the student symptomatic? If the student isn't symptomatic, there's no quarantine. If it's yes, they have to quarantine or is otherwise directed by the local health department. CDC recommends that the asymptomatic student who is vaccinated, that student can still come to school. They have to wear a mask both in school, because it's a requirement, and in public indoor settings for 14 days. If they're going to the store, they can go to the store with mom or dad, but they have to have a mask on indoors. It's only a recommendation that they be tested within 3 to 5 days after exposure. I think that should be a requirement for our district. We're making it a requirement of our employees. It only makes sense that we rule out that that student, this is a period of time in which if they were to develop COVID-19, their research indicates that it would begin to show. So I think that we should implement this as we're dealing with vaccinated students who are able to be in class. It's not a requirement though, and the county is not making it a requirement. They're saying that that is up to us.
Can we make it a requirement though, if we don't have the test, we would have to?
We can make it, we can make it a requirement and people can go get that. We can make our test available if people can't access it, but they can access the test privately. Okay. Go to the next sheet, Peter. Different for an adult to student contact. Let's use the example of a teacher and a student in a classroom, or teachers in an office together, or a student case in an adult contact. You remember that the CDC indicates that there's a 6-foot rule for staff in schools to be socially distanced from one another. Was the exposed individual within 6 feet of a positive case for 15 minutes or more over a 24-hour period? If yes, is the person vaccinated? If yes, is symptomatic? Is it symptomatic? No. No quarantine, test in 3 to 5 days. So that, if that is an adult, that adult can come to work. They have to wear their mask at work because it's required. They have to wear their mask in a public setting indoors. And it's recommended that they be tested within 3 to 5 days. Thus far, we've had some employees, 2 or 3, I believe, right? That we've required to be tested, who were vaccinated, who have COVID. So when I said earlier that the standards for quarantining are very different for asymptomatic and vaccinated people, whether that be a student or an employee, this is enforced by the county, not by the school district, with the exception of it is not a mandate to test either students or employees on the 3rd through the 5th day, but it has been recommended. Okay. And then we can go to the next one. And we talk about the cafeteria. And was the individual within 6 feet of a case for 15 minutes or more over 24-hour period? If no, no quarantine. That's why we're emphasizing, and I know people are concerned that we're rushing students through lunch. But one of the reasons we want the students to eat within 15 minutes is because we don't want them to be quarantined in the event that they're sitting near someone and they have their mask off who tests positive for COVID. If it's yes, was the person vaccinated? If it's yes, is the individual symptomatic? No. Again, the same, they can come to school, they can come to work. They've got to be tested within 3 to 5 days. They're excluded for 10 days if they are symptomatic and not vaccinated. There is no testing out in New York State of a quarantine, and that was emphasized to us by the county today. Okay, some states, CDC says that you can test out of a quarantine. In other words, if you're quarantined, you're not symptomatic, but you weren't vaccinated, you have no indications that you have COVID-19, but you were exposed. In some states, you can test out. I think on the 7th day. Or so do you know that off the top of your head? I think it was the 7th day. But not the case in New York State. Because we've had inquiries already from some parents of athletes who are quarantined. Can they test out of it so they can come back to play? No, not if they're unvaccinated. It's another reason why I believe we should have a policy as we approach winter sports that all of the players be vaccinated. It is to the benefit of not only the individual player, it is to the benefit of the program that the district is trying to operate. If you can imagine indoor sports versus outdoor sports, the kids are outside right now, and we hope that the COVID rates stay flat or go down, but we know what happened last winter. You could lose a third of your season. they're going to have 3 games a week. You take soccer right now, for example, 16 games in a season. If you're quarantined for 10 days, 3 games a week, that's 5 or 6 games out of their season. In the case of football, it's probably 2 out of 7 or 8, depending on sectional play. It impacts the student. It impacts the program. It is an individual choice. It also impacts the ability of the vaccinated student to get back out on the field. We have athletes who were permitted to come back who were identified as contacts because they were vaccinated. So they're back on the volleyball court. They're back on the football field. Additionally, many districts are going in this direction. In our league, it's only been Albany and Bethlehem that made the decision to require all their fall high-risk athletes to be vaccinated in order to play. I've asked the other superintendents of the Suburban Council if they're considering this or if they've made it, and they haven't made the decision yet. Mr. Leonard is in agreement that this should happen. And I've asked him to bring this forward as an issue to the Suburban Council League because I think we would be better off if they made this decision as a league. Because you could be in a situation where your entire team is vaccinated and you're playing against another team and they're not. And, you know, there ought to be standards within the leagues and within the section. So I just raised this issue for discussion and thought tonight. Maybe we can pick it up for discussion at the next meeting, but I think we want to give enough lead time to the families if we're going to make this a requirement for basketball, boys and girls, for wrestling. And you can see how this plays out. And I'm bringing this up now because you can see how this plays out in the contact tracing process. Kids are going to be in class. If they're vaccinated and they're asymptomatic, kids are going to be on the court. If they're asymptomatic and they're vaccinated, they're going to be home for 10 days if they're not, regardless of whether they're symptomatic or not, because you can't test out. So it's a heavy thing to think about because we favor participation and we want the kids out there, but you also have the probability of losing the season because you could have a situation where, you know, there isn't a sufficient number of players or isn't a sufficient number of players in particular positions or at certain levels that could really impact the ability to have a game or to run a practice. The nurses are updating, I think I said this earlier, the nurses are updating the vaccination status of all of our students right now, including our student athletes. And we're continuing to communicate with our families this type of information so they know that they're making an informed decision. It'd be easier if it was a state requirement. It'd be easier if it was a section requirement. It currently isn't. Our attorneys have reviewed this. They say we have the authority to do it. That's really all I have in the presentation.
Jeff, is that posted on our website?
Yes. If it's not posted on our website, it will be posted on our website. I know it's on board docs, but I'll make sure it's on the web. I think it is. I know I sent it to Mark, but
That was developed by Questar. Who developed
the contact tracing,
it?
it's been developed by a work group that included Cap Region BOCES, Albany County, I believe Saratoga County was involved in Wishy BOCES, Rensselaer County and Questar BOCES, and Greene County and Columbia County. So many counties had representatives there from the county health department, many districts. A superintendent from each region was identified to be part of it. It was Angeline Mahoney from Berlin, Craig Hansen, and sometimes Gladys, I think, was part of these discussions. And then the document was brought back to the county health departments and they sanctioned it. They said, we agree with this. We waited till our county reviewed it and said, yes, you can put that out. We agree with that. So it's been sanctioned and approved by the counties.
On the testing recommendation, excuse me, with asymptomatic vaccinated individuals, do we have a sense, Jeff, your recommendation was to require that? Do we have a sense that that's happening throughout on that? So asymptomatic vaccinated individuals, not quarantining, but we're recommending
But they
a
tested.
requirement that they test anyway.
I don't have a good sense of that.
Okay.
I can get that information.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good practice. I think
Yeah.
it protects everybody. And obviously you want to make sure that if you are exposed,
Right.
We've seen the asymptomatic breakthrough cases, like you said.
The county thought that was a good use of our testing. Of course, we need more tests, but they
Yep.
thought that was a good use of our testing because it would be immediately available to the student. We could do the testing for the family. And then, the student is already in school. It's
right.
not an inconvenience. We could work something out for individual students to be able to meet that requirement.
Yeah.
I think it becomes the issue becomes the access to the testing.
Testing, right.
And eventually we're going to run out of tests.
But I think this document is a terrific document. It's probably one of the few things that was actually throughout the region was agreed upon with all the county health departments and the participation of the
Right.
superintendents and then regional safety people. So it certainly shows a clear path of
Yeah.
what happens and the implications of not being vaccinated. So, and
There's
the
also
event,
a document in there on the busing,
Yep.
where, there's a document in there that shows where you're sitting. And in the event that a student is sitting in a certain location, what the likelihood of the number of students being quarantined is. So really, if a positive student is sitting in the middle of the bus, there's more students that eventually could wind up being quarantined as a result of it.
So, I don't know if I maybe misunderstood you, or I don't know if I misunderstood you up there, but you said you want to alter this document to make something more stringent than in here?
No, what I'm saying is what it says, pull it back up, Peter. Here. If you can pull back up any one of the,
keep going.
go to the classroom. It's easier. Just go to the first one. No, the contact tracing document, but the first actual page. Sorry.
Top of the page.
This is a great document. It's just hard to present. It's complicated. Okay, go down to the, okay. What I'm saying, I'm sorry, go back up, Peter. What I'm saying is, if you're a positive student, you were wearing a mask and you were wearing a mask correctly and you expose another student, okay, wearing the masks, they're not quarantined in class, okay? Were they within 6 feet of the case for 15 minutes or more? Let's say the answer is no. Scroll down, Peter. There's no quarantine. But if you go on this side of the chart, was the student less than 3 feet from the case for 15 minutes or more over a 24-hour period? Yes. Then it goes to, were they vaccinated? Yes. And it goes to, was the student symptomatic? If it's no, so you've got a vaccinated student, no symptoms. Symptoms would likely show up, according to CDC, within 3 to 5 days. It's recommended that they be tested. I'm saying I think it should be mandated that they're testing. Because how do you know? I'm saying that we should, as a matter of district policy, test those kids. They're already in school. It's not a condition to return to school. They're already in school. They're not losing out on instruction. They're not losing out on sports because they're vaccinated and they're asymptomatic. I'm saying we test them at that point in time to rule out that they're going to have COVID.
Is there any questions about that practice? Do we need to have more conversation about it? Or I think it's, is it
Anybody
supported? Is there
disagree
any
with that?
concerns about that?
I do.
Okay.
And that's where I was going. So if we're going to be the only district that says that we're going to test, here, no quarantine, CDC recommendations, test 3 to 5 days after exposure. We're saying, no, we're going to test. So now we're going away from this document and kind of going on our own.
I don't believe we're the only ones. I don't have the data on it, but other districts are in the same position regarding this. I don't know what they're
That's
doing.
why I was asking who sat on this, because if everybody agreed to it and we had representation there and the county did and everybody agreed to this, and now all of a sudden people are not agreeing to it, would be my concern. You know, why all of a sudden now are people not agreeing to it when we agreed to it before? And if we say we're going to test and then all of a sudden a parent says, well, wait a minute, this document says, no, you're not going to test. I don't want my student tested or my son or daughter tested. What is our next choice? They go home?
Not necessarily.
I just
There's a-
see there's a lot of
it's-
what
it's-
ifs now.
There are a lot of what ifs because that's the way it's written in CDC. It's written just like that in CDC. And I think the regional group didn't want to go beyond that because at the time this was developed, these other things didn't come out from state ed. And this memo that came out from state ed recently, it says the same thing. It says that recommends.
So you're saying, Mark, that we recommend you get tested. We don't want to change the document and the policy. It's more about,
don't want to see us change this very document.
Yep.
Agreed upon by.
Yep.
You know, many Department of Health and now the state ed is also saying the same thing. And now we're saying we want to change it, is my understanding.
Yep.
Okay, and we gonna be the, you know, if it was that brought up in this working group?
It's been brought up a couple times within our group, Rensselaer County superintendents, and I don't know what the districts have decided. It's still being discussed.
And
Our county has said that's up. We can't force that because it says recommendation. We can strongly convince, we can strongly recommend, we can say we think it's in the best interest to rule out COVID by doing it. I'd like to see that happening more than not happening, you know, that we're actually testing the student. And I think in the employee, I mean, I guess how do people feel about the employees? I think, you know, you have employees who are permitted to work, even though they've been exposed. If they're vaccinated, they're wearing their masks. They're still working. You know, last year we did have cases where someone's fine until day 5. And then they start to develop symptoms. So, I mean, that's another consideration. I recommend that we require that for employees as a safeguard for the employees, safeguard for the students. I recommend it for the students too. I think it's an additional safeguard.
We've actually, in the college that I work at, we actually recently just had this where a student was in a class, tested positive the next day, so was asymptomatic when they were in the class, and was surrounded by a number of other students, everybody wearing masks. The tests were offered for anyone who wanted to at the 3 to 5 days in order to bring people back. I don't know that employees are one thing. I think we could probably require that, but for students, it gives a level of peace of mind to the parents that they don't have to take the child out of school, that they can get them tested, and it gives them a sense of security. So I definitely think we should offer it. Required, I think, is a little bit different, But I think a lot of people are going to want this
Yeah, me too.
because nobody wants to be sick. And this gives you the opportunity to have some peace of mind, knowing that you've waited your 3 to 5 days. You've now been tested, you come out clean, you feel better. I know because I did it on Friday,
Mhm.
just for that exact same reason. I was going to be seeing people. I didn't want to take the chance. I got tested.
One of the difficulties that the county reports is, and I think what I'm about to say is related to why I think this is important. It's often difficult for a family or even a student to know that they were symptomatic. Okay. In initial reporting to the county, a student or a family may say, well, she hasn't had any symptoms or he hasn't had any symptoms. Then after some level of question, they said, well, yeah, they had a stuffy nose, but we thought it was just his allergies. Turns out both our test and the PCR test showed it was COVID. So you can have situations where somebody is feeling fine, not cognizant of symptoms, and then maybe it starts to become more prevalent between day 3 and day 5. And the county has shared those instances with us last year. Also, they told us today that 40% of their new daily cases are breakthrough cases, people that are already vaccinated. So this covers vaccinated people who are asymptomatic initially. They could become symptomatic and they can get it even though they're vaccinated. So I think the testing protects against those circumstances.
Definitely agree we should offer it in our nurses. They're gonna be the ones calling the parents, say, hey, here's what we're willing to do. We're able to do this. Would you like us to do this? We recommend this. I'm okay with that. But
Okay.
to say we require and going against CDC, Mercer County Health, Greene County Health, Albany County, Hilton County Health, that we're all involved in the creation of this document. What is our, who's guiding us? We have a doctor or somebody behind us saying, hey, I recommend this, you should do this. What is our decision being based on? And all these,
It's based on a verbal conversations with the county and saying that, they're saying we can't enforce it. We think it's a good idea. So.
and again, we can offer, we can suggest contacting parents, offering it, even say, we strongly encourage. Yes, we don't, but to say, to go now and change this document and say, Springfield Schools requires it. Have to support.
Well, I don't know the answer to what we do if they say no. I mean, I don't think we keep them out of school. Yeah, well, I
The
don't,
parent said, no,
I
I'm
don't-
fine with your document right
Yeah.
here that says this, I'm fine with that.
it's like a lot of things with this are not necessarily thought out in terms of enforceability.
But
But
at least we have a nice document here that outlines that parents can look at. Like, even if you wanted to put another line or let's say East Greenbush Central School option, here's what we're willing to do for the child. Okay with that, but if this was produced and all these districts were involved in making this, and all these Department of Health were involved in making this, that piece is not in there. If the county came out and said, hey, this is great, but we also recommend this, then I would say, okay,
Well-
now we've got our county health department.
Right.
pushing this.
that could happen as the situation changes. To be honest with you, there could be situations where they're starting to see kids that were not quarantined or employees that were not quarantined getting,
All of this.
Yeah.
There are any- Of, start next month booster shot.
Mhm.
That kind of thing.
I genuinely feel very sorry for all of you working in the district, because the last thing you want to do is to be asking educators to now almost be healthcare professionals. I know the challenge, and there are more challenges coming your way.
Yeah.
As you rightly said, there would be people becoming positive, although vaccinated. So let's look at a plan B for when we are told that the testers, the nurses are positive and have to be out. That is very, very possible. We need a plan B for coverage because they can become positive, whether vaccinated or otherwise. So stay strong. It's a very challenging time, crazy time, but look, we take it one day at a time, all right? And we support you in our quest to make sure that we put in place systems to protect the kids of our district. It's a challenge coming, but we can only take it one day at a time, all right?
So let's try to agree to an understanding that we'll monitor the circumstances. I may advocate within our circle of superintendents and DOH that this become a more stricter requirement. And see where the other districts, how the districts feel about this. We felt put in a bind to some degree because this is saying it's best practice. Be tested within 3 to 5 days, but we can't mandate it. The county the organizations in charge of health can't mandate it. So I'll continue the discussions with our regional groups. We'll monitor the situation, and I may bring this back to you, and particularly if we find that there are circumstances where we are finding either employees and or students who are becoming symptomatic and test positive within this time frame, I'll let you know, and we may need to make an adjustment at that time.
So this is Rensselaer County Department of Health that's saying we can't mandate it.
Yes,
So, but they're saying we can.
as a matter of school policy, we can mandate it. Yes,
We can go beyond the minimum recommendation to
right.
CDC. Is that
We're
what
permitted to
you're
go,
saying?
that's what they say. We're permitted to exceed the guidance.
We can be more stringent, but less.
Right. That's
Right.
correct.
And I think Frank said it best, that it is going to be challenging. They have to adjust fire. And what?
Right.
Right, right.
What about with employees?
If we do that, well, it'll have to be through the union, I'm assuming.
Yeah, we'll have to have we're in the process of having discussions with the unions about a number of different things. We've held off on any formalization of any agreements regarding anything that differs from the contract until such time as we have more clarity regarding some of the stuff that's coming out with the change in the governor. So we were in the process with the teachers of having some discussions about opening plans, and because we're required to impact bargain some of these changes, but I requested that we put it on hold until such time as we have more clarity regarding the testing, because this was before the testing came about. Before, it was only today that we were clear with our county on how the procedures are going to work for contact tracing, not this document, but how we're going to manage it internally and who's going to do what and how contacts are going to be made. So there was a lot of things up in the air because of the lateness of all of this and the transition, that I don't feel we should bind the district to anything because it could change next week. But we are having discussions with the teachers. We're having another meeting on Monday, and they're fruitful discussions, but I don't want to agree to something and that, 2 days later, the state comes out with something that makes that circumstance different, whether it be contact tracing changes, whether it be testing, whether it be an increase in the number of kids that are quarantined and need to be on a different model of remote instruction. There's lots of things that were uncertain in the transition as we were trying to prepare for school, that I just can't. I don't want to bind the administration and the board to anything until we've aired out what's coming. But yes, we would have to talk about some of the things that are not requirements in state regulation
Mhm.
with our bargaining units.
And from my standpoint, I think I'm a little biased, probably Frank is as well, because in our employers, you get tested every 3 days until you're out of that risk point. And that's just part of your job responsibility. So I'm open to it, but again, I'm in a different industry than what it is here. However, I will say, you're still having a lot of public facing situations here, just like we have
Right.
in nursing homes and hospitals.
Mhm.
And that's why we're doing that, to prevent that spread. So I'm open to that idea, to recommend them to be tested, or at least start to have a conversation about it with the labor unions.
I also think the large majority of employers would want to be tested. We've actually had, in response to some of our surveying,
Mhm.
fully vaccinated people who want to be tested.
Right.
We had a couple.
On a regular
one or two
basis.
that would not be required under the new state mandate to be tested because they're vaccinated that may want to be tested, and we
Voluntary testing. basically.
voluntary tested.
Hmm.
So,
Sam, as you rightly said, I support the idea of going with a recommendation. However, still saying that, look, let's test. It's a good thing to test. We don't lose anything testing.
Right.
And one other area that we might want to look at is we getting phone calls, the district getting phone calls about exposures in the community that affects the school district.
Right.
So it's not just what we are implementing, it's also going to be where our staff go after school and getting a phone call.
Right.
They went to Walmart and they are positive, and now you get a phone call and you have to take out almost 6 or 10 people.
right.
And then you take 5 more people, and then all the tested are all positive, and now you have no one tested. So you have the test kits, you don't have a tester, and we need to implement the testing regime, which is very difficult. And that is why I'm only encouraging you that brace for impact. It's going to be very tough, true. It's going to be very tough, but we will try and provide you the support necessary because it is a very challenging time. Unfortunately, no one knows what the right answers are. You know, these mandates and laws, most of them are very experimental based on everything going on right now. You know, we have 315% right now, and the last time I checked, we shouldn't have had any cases by now, because, you know, most people are vaccinated and etc. So it's mostly experimentation. We'll get more dear administrator letters from the state, and they'll be changing and revising every single day, and it's going to affect everything. So it's going to be challenging. I can only encourage that we all stay together as a team, helping make decisions, ultimately looking at the interests of our kids in the school. That's all we can do, one day at a time. Planning ahead is going to be very difficult because you might get another letter tomorrow morning telling you everything changed.
Usually Thursday afternoons or Friday afternoons.
Normally, yes, Friday, 5.
We were encouraged that under the new state leadership, we got it on a Thursday instead of a Friday. It was very good progress. Yeah.
Yep, good point.
Yeah, right. On sports, right now, we've just been trying to put out as much information as possible about the advantages of being vaccinated if you want to participate. I mean, it's really clear. I don't know that entering into this, when decisions were made for people to sign up for athletics, it would have been nice to know going into a season what the potential impact of not being vaccinated might have on your student being quarantined and not being able to participate. We weren't even clear as districts of, you know, how this was going to play out. There are processes we're trying to use through the nurses to monitor whether or not putting this information out is causing parents to have their kids vaccinated. There are certain teams with high percentages of vaccination, more than 90%. There are some down in the 60%. And we're worried about the students that are out on our teams right now We pretty much know what winter sports they play. And that there may be higher percentages of unvaccinated players inside the gym playing basketball or on the wrestling mats. And that's a real concern to us. So we don't have to decide that tonight, but it is something that I feel we can't leave unaddressed unless we want to see what happens. But if we go with a policy now that informs the parents, now meaning maybe after the next meeting, that we inform the parents that if you're going to play a high-risk sport in the winter, you're going to have to be vaccinated, then they have enough time. That's all. They have enough time to meet that requirement.
So I would be remiss to say, because I have a modified kid,
Yeah.
Who's under the age. of
Those that are
vaccination.
eligible to be vaccinated would be
Gotcha.
the rule.
Okay.
Those that are eligible to be vaccinated would be required to be vaccinated. Those that are not, of course, can't meet the requirement, so they wouldn't be.
Okay,
They'd be
that's,
exempt from it.
that's how like
They'd
Albany
be
and Bethlehem
like
is doing
sixth
it?
graders,
Mhm.
some seventh graders who play, sixth graders don't count, but seventh graders that play modified would not be age eligible.
The other scenario will be if somebody tests positive, I don't think you can get the vaccination, Frank, for like a month or
Right.
something after you're
Right.
positive.
If you're
or-
not, we would
So,
develop
You have
language
exceptions to that. Okay.
would include exceptions to that.
and
The
he's
other-
getting vaccinated next week, so.
Right. There's two other issues that have come up with questions in some of our parent meetings. What is the return to school protocol if you're a student? It's the same as it was last year. It's an alternative diagnosis. If you have a COVID-19 symptom and you have to have an alternative diagnosis submitted by the doctor, that you have something else besides COVID that's indicative of those symptoms, or you have to have a negative COVID test, resolution of symptoms, fever-free, all those same requirements that we were waiting last year to get, they're embedded within these documents. Okay. The other one is lost it for a minute. Give me a minute. Oh, in the case of testing, just want to reiterate that it's not required for students, right? We've had some communications from parents. Why can't you require all the kids to be tested? We can't. And it's not mandated as of this point. And
What was the question?
elementary students, obviously, a big game changer would be when vaccination are approved for elementary children. I think that will have a big impact on the situation right now. I mean, we're getting cases of elementary kids. Got 2 today, and some less within the last few days, and school hasn't even started yet. So, and also is the big variable is people that are vaccinated can get it. And the numbers in our county seem to be a little higher than some of the data I read nationally. I don't know why. They said 30 to 40% of new cases. Something that came from the state today, I think, had a lower number. But the push of the state is to get 12 to 17-year-olds vaccinated. The numbers are markedly low compared to the state average of 18 and older. So the other thing I want to update you on is we've had 9 students approved for the Questar remote option. They were all medically approved by Dr. Albert. I signed the letter. Dr. Albert signed the letter. In cases where the students whose parents applied for that had an IEP, Molly reviewed the services that were required of that student, had conversations with the parent. In many cases, the Questar program, in combination with our special ed staff, wouldn't work. So we've come up with some of our own options for our special education staff to service those kids virtually. There's one pending application that was received yesterday. We have not denied any. We simply, with the students that were received special education services, we worked with the parent to come up with an option that was acceptable to them. We didn't have a large number of those though. Total of 10 or 11 total applications. So that program starts the 13th.
Peter, can you bring John back up on the screen? I think he's still there. Just a question on, so we have the contact tracing, we have the students who can't start school. What's happening for those students who are kind of caught in this 10 to 14 days at home?
If they're quarantined as a
Yep.
result of a county order.
Yep.
At the middle school and the high school level, they were provided with streaming
Streaming,
into
okay.
the class. I had a conversation today with the principals about a couple kids because they're coming back Monday
Mhm.
and it's only Thursday and Friday. So generally there's not a lot of work that's missed. So the teachers are being informed and that streaming may not get fully set up until the first full week of school. Because you're not going to miss a lot of content as long as at the elementary school level, it's tutoring, which will be arranged by Mr. McHugh's office and likely to be after hours. As the tutoring is done by our teachers, offered to our teachers first. But that's the arrangement that we have.
And I imagine the first couple of days here will be a logistical ironing out of a lot of different things, from transportation to getting kids in the doors and
Yeah.
different places and making sure they're settled and ready to come back, and then all the different things that happen within a school day, and then on the way out. So it'll be a lot of kind of going through,
Yep.
making sure people understand. I think patience is the big one. Flexibility, another big one.
There's
Right?
the theme of our opening days. It's patience, flexibility,
Exactly.
mental health, social emotional learning. Very well received few days. And I want to thank Mr. McHugh for putting it together. It was very well received. What was the number of people that participated in 3,000?
Oh, that's awesome. Wow.
3,000 sessions.
300
sessions.
SRP and EGTA. Over 30 sessions ran on the 5 days.
I mean, I think to just, we talk about all the challenges, but I think it's super exciting to be back in person. Schools are back in person. The state's mindset, stay in person, at this point, and really excited that the staff are back. The kids will be back tomorrow. And it's been a long haul for a lot of folks. And I think that it really is a really amazing achievement, the things that are in place, the processes, just people making sure that we're safe and the kids are coming back. And I just kudos to the administration and the staff for working together to make that happen and to go over through this level of detail with our parents in our community, answering questions. I hope that people feel that they have a lot of the answers that we can provide at this time, knowing that things do change. There are a lot of what ifs that we can't answer. I recommend that you talk to your principal, your teacher, work things out, and then make sure that your child's experience is the most positive one it can be as we open tomorrow. So looking forward to it.
We are
Anybody
too.
else?
We're looking forward to the kids coming tomorrow morning and we'll be all
Definitely.
around. Yeah.
Can I ask a non-COVID question?
That'd be wonderful.
In light of the boil water advisory for East Greenbush, are we set for that with our
Yes.
schools here in the community?
The 4 schools that are within East Greenbush have bottled water that was delivered today. There are signs on the water fountains and we sent a communication out to the parents to, most parents have their kids bring water bottles anyways, but
Yeah.
that they should bring them. And we have cases that Paul Pickle arranged to be picked up today and delivered to Goff, Janae, Red Mill, and Columbia.
Yeah, I was just kind of checking and they said the next update won't be until mid-afternoon tomorrow,
Tomorrow.
which as they're getting on the bus, we'll probably hear we're okay.
We got a text message and an alert from the town tonight that it's still on for tomorrow. So
Thank you.
Any board members, any other closing thoughts?
We did a really good job last year, with the whole situation. Very confident that our safety practice that we have in place are top notch. We can deal with the current situation. I'm pretty proud of our district for what we've done. The guidance that we've got working with other districts. But I don't think that we led the way in a lot. So I think that they're going to give our district, very proud of.
Great.
So,
Thank you.
John, you're out there in virtual world. Any comments?
Yes, if I missed some of it, the power took out my internet, so you're being live streamed from the boat launch in beautiful Brant Lake. So if I'm repeating what other people say, I apologize. But most importantly, to Jeff and your team and the staff, I appreciate the depth of detail that you go in to try to cover all the scenarios that are presented. And I did hear Frank say, and I couldn't agree more, that we can plan for as much as we can plan for, but the real success is going to be the flexibility of the plan and the ability to adjust throughout this crisis. And I appreciate the hard work that you're doing. And I have read all the documentation that you have provided us, and I support your initiative. That's it.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. Any other closing comments, board members? Frank?
My confidence in your leadership, it's still very unwavering.
Thank you.
And with this board, I believe that we can overcome this tough time. We will together be able to overcome it. All right.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you.
Any others? I guess that's a wrap. I think we look forward to hearing more about how tomorrow goes. Those of you who still have children in the district, sending them off to school tomorrow is going to be exciting. And then I have a senior this year, so my last senior, my youngest, finishing up the school year. So very excited about that. And I appreciate everyone taking the time to come out this evening to talk about our reopening, the different information that's been shared. Very helpful. I hope our parents and community members can appreciate that too. And again, it'd be important to work together, be flexible, adaptable, adjust where necessary, and just keep the lines of communication open as we open school in person. So with that, I need a motion to adjourn. Deanna, second. Michelle, all those in favor? Approved. All right, have a good night, everybody.